It already seems like a long time ago, when back in May of 2020, as the COVID pandemic was tearing through Vermont and the rest of the nation, the Vermont National Guard and the Vermont Food Bank, a nonprofit corporation that provides food to those in need through a network of about 300 community partners, were distributing needed food to thousands of area residents who converged on Bromley Mountain's parking lot. The pandemic had forced businesses to close, throwing people out of work, and uncertainty reigned. And at community food distribution sites, like the Manchester Community Food Cupboard, the cars were lined up, their occupants lining up for food, many no doubt wondering what the future held. That was then. Now, about 2.5 years later, the picture looks different. While the pandemic is hardly over, the scenes from Bromley are no longer in the headlines. But are the needs still there? And are the food banks still staying busy? To find out, we stopped by the Manchester Food Cupboard recently to check in, which is where we met up with Martha Carey, the director of the food cupboard. Things are just as busy now as they were back then, she told us.
I think we're busier now than we were then. There's a lot less help available now than there was then. A lot of programs have ended, like, there was some extra child tax credit money, extra unemployment money, other checks from the government, and that all stopped, and now the prices of things are a lot higher. So yeah, we're busier now than we've ever been. We are open 3 days a week. We're open Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. We are open to anyone in Vermont. Most of our people come from the very immediate area, but then we get people, people who work in town, people whose kids go to school here in town. Sometimes people come, on the bus, because the bus stop is right outside. So the majority are people, from right here within like a 10-mile radius, and then I would say maybe another 20% of the people who come are from towns further afield.
John Sales is the executive director of the Vermont Food Bank and someone we spoke with back in the spring of 2020. From the statewide perspective, he confirmed that the needs for food assistance hadn't changed, citing inflationary pressures and the ending of some of the federal and state supports that had helped people navigate through the worst phases of the pandemic.
It did get a little better after that initial, really crisis, and people were scared. And, we, as you were mentioning earlier, we had the lines at the airports and other places, the National Guard helping distribute farmers to families, food boxes, food that, came in from the federal government. Things got a little better after that, but since inflation kind of took hold, things have actually gotten worse. And the latest numbers we have, and this is a UVM team, in fact, and I can send you the link to their data, that 2 in 5 Vermonters have experienced food insecurity or hunger in the last year. And we're seeing this trend across the country that things got a little bit better when there was a lot of assistance there. There was rental assistance, there were the stimulus payments, there was extra food, extra SNAP benefit, and housing assistance. A lot of that has gone away. In fact, the boost in SNAP benefits, which here is 3 Squares Vermont, is going to end at the end of March. And so all those supports have dwindled and are going to be going away. And people have not bounced back from this economically. And we're seeing a sustained increase in folks coming to our network partners. In fact, we just did a survey not too long ago. 60% of the food banks, over 200 food shelf and meal site partners have seen increases, and some of them, the increases are about 20 to 50%, the number of people coming in. And at our veggie van goes, we've seen record numbers, and we're we're staying at those high numbers right now. So things don't feel like they're getting better.
How do we kind of sort of solve this on a more long-term basis?
Yeah, it really is kind of a macroeconomic issue. One of the things I think has happened is that hunger has come out of the shadows a little bit. I think that what happened during COVID actually reduced the stigma a little bit. And particularly for programs like our Veggie Van Go, which is a drive-through, no questions asked food distribution, which we do there's 16 of them around the state. We do them in all counties. And, I think people were struggling quietly before COVID. And now people are seeing what can happen when there's help there, right? Because we saw it. The help was there. There was, millions of pounds of federal food that came in. There were stimulus payments. There was rental assistance. There was, housing assistance for people who are unhoused. And we saw things get better. The child tax credit reduced child poverty immediately by 40%. And the follow-up studies showed that most families spent some of that money on food. And so people got a glimpse of what it's like when there's help. And as those resources dwindled, wages are up, but wages are not up as much as costs, particularly housing, fuel, and food. Gas prices have come down a little bit, but they're not where they were pre-pandemic. And housing costs have skyrocketed, and they're not coming down, right? And food costs, again, I just read in the paper this morning that food costs are up almost 12% over this month last year. There's eggs are up 100% because of avian flu. So there's a lot of things going on, and the families who, maybe living paycheck to paycheck, maybe not, maybe just having a hard month this month because of something, car repair or fill the oil tank or, pay a medical bill, are reaching out more for help. And it's just more visible than it was. But I think that this level of need has really always been there.
Lindsay Hardy works with the Vermont Food Bank as part of its philanthropic food raising operation. She noted that Bennington County was one of the areas in the state the food bank has identified as being most in need of food services.
I guess taking just a quick step back and to kind of explain that when we got the extraordinary gift from Mackenzie Scott of the $9 million, a good portion of that money just sort of rolled into our increased operations to help meet the sort of COVID pandemic need. But there was a portion of those funds that was set aside for additive work that we were calling our priority initiatives. And those two initiatives fall into two sort of buckets or lanes. One is called community-driven initiatives, and the other is our Food Security Innovation Lab. And the geographic communities that the Deep Communities work is focusing on are Bennington, Addison County, and the Northeast Kingdom. And while I can't speak to like current numbers of food insecurity on the county level, we do know that Bennington County, along with Addison and Northeast Kingdom, have historically been underserved by our programs and services and have increased incidence of poverty and food insecurity compared to, the rest of the state. So that's sort of the basis for why we chose those communities. The work in Bennington is underway. Over the course of the summer, we hired a woman to be a grassroots organizer, and she spent a lot of time volunteering at local food shelves and food access points throughout Bennington, and started to make relationships with people that worked there and also people that use the services, the shoppers. And in, I want to say, during November and December, and I got to participate in one series. Ashley, the woman in Bennington, held a bunch of focus groups with folks with lived experience and sort of gleaning their ideas around some of the barriers that they face, some of the issues that they're dealing with, not just in terms of, you know, how to access food, but just in their lives sometimes too. And those conversations have more or less wrapped up, and they're taking place similarly in Addison County and the Northeast Kingdom. And that's going to sort of drive how we respond to sort of shaping some of our programs to better serve the needs of the folks.
It may be that one of the lessons learned from the pandemic is that helping people with their basic needs for food, along with housing, is an ongoing challenge, one that won't be disappearing just because the COVID case counts are falling into more of an endemic state as opposed to a pandemic one. It's clear there will be a role to play for organizations like the Vermont Food Bank and the Manchester Food Cupboard going forward. For the GNAT-TV News Project, I'm Andrew McKeever.